What does the AFC East have in store for them this offseason? Let's find out. Alright, so how I'm going to do this, I'm just going to go through the top free agents for each team, their first round pick, their top 3 needs, few questions I have, and their projected salary cap. Alright, let's start with the Buffalo Bills. Now, their top free agent is Lorenzo Alexander. He's been a solid starter for 3 years. You've got to make sure that he is back next year because he's one of their better players on defense. And that was a really good defense last year. As far as their top needs, it's offensive players. They need wide receivers. They need a running back to replace LaShawn McCoy, and they need some offensive linemen to protect Josh Allen. And with $78 million in cap space, they should be able to get that done. Now, some things we want to talk about. Kyle Williams is no longer with the team. After 13 years with the Buffalo Bills, he decided to retire. So they have got to find out who's going to replace the leader on that defense. He was a leader, and he was a really good player for them. Calvin Benjamin was released during the season. Now they have to figure out who do they want as their starting receivers. Do they want to try to roll the dice with some of the players that they have? Do they want to go for some free agents? Do they want to try to draft a few guys? They've got to figure out what they want to do with wide receivers because that's a big position, especially when you have a young quarterback. And speaking of that quarterback, Josh Allen's going into his second year. He showed some promise in his first year, but he's got to keep getting better. He's got to get the completion percentage up. Can't make too many mistakes. He just has to be the quarterback that the Bills need right now. Let's move on to the Miami Dolphins. The Dolphins are the 13th overall pick, and they don't really have a lot of cap space. They got the fewest in the AFC East right now at $11 million. But do expect them to make some moves to get some more cap room. Their top free agent is Jawan James, their right tackle. They drafted him in the first round. He developed into a pretty solid right tackle. I say try to find a way to keep him. Always nice to have a solid right tackle at your disposal. Now, as for the top needs, let's talk about one thing before then. Are they going to move on from Ryan Tannehill? If they move on from him, then quarterback becomes their top need. Now, the question is, would they go rookie or would they go veteran? This is not really a great free agency class for veteran quarterbacks, and this is not really a great draft for quarterbacks either. Now, they also are going to need help on the offensive line. Yes, Jawan James is a free agent, but Larry Tunsil has not really panned out as well as they have. He's shown some promise, but he hasn't really put it all together yet. And on the interior, they gotta fix that up. And on the defensive line, they gotta get some defensive linemen because it looks like they may be moving on from Robert Quinn. And not only might they be moving on from Robert Quinn, could they also be moving on from Cameron Wake? He's been there for a long time, but he's getting up there in age. Will the Dolphins let him go to another team? And the last thing, what are they gonna do with this receiving corps? Devontae Parker doesn't look like he'll be back. And there's not really a lot of guys there. You still have Kenny Stills, but you got rid of Jarvis Landry. They've got to figure out what they're going to do with this receiving corps. This is a little surprising. The Patriots' top free agent is their kicker, Steven Gostkowski. Now, how's that possible? Because he's one of the best kickers in the league. Yeah, he missed a kick in the Super Bowl, but you know what? So did the Rams kicker, so I'm not holding that against him. But every time the Patriots have needed him to make a big kick, he's done. I do expect them to re-sign him, but the Patriots have got to figure out what they're going to do with the rest of their free agents. They have a lot of defensive backs and defensive linemen. In fact, just about every single one of their starters last year on the defensive line is a free agent. That's a big deal for a team like the Patriots. They only have $14 million in cap space. You can expect them to make some moves. However, is it going to be enough to keep the guys that they need to keep? Now for the needs, I talked about defensive back and defensive line, and also wide receivers and tight ends. Gronkowski, you have no idea if he's going to be back or not. And at wide receiver, Cordell Patterson's free agent, Chris Hogan's a free agent, Philip Dorsett is a free agent, and Julian Edelman is 32 years old. And yeah, he's a Super Bowl MVP, but keep this in mind. He's only played all 16 games twice in his career. Twice. And if he goes down and Gronk retires, Patriots could be in for a long season at wide receiver. Now, they would be fine because they still have Brady. However, you can only get so far with a receiving corps. Patriots have got to shore up their receiving corps. And the last thing for them, would they draft a quarterback early on? Brady's going to be 42 years old next year. Could the Patriots be drafting his successor? And lastly, the New York Jets, who have $95 million in cap space. And with that, plus the third overall pick, they could get a pass rusher, get some receivers, maybe get some offensive linemen. Those are their top needs. and they are in great position to get them. And their top free agent is wide receiver Quincy Enunwa. Sorry if I pronounced that wrong. Quincy Enunwa has been a really good receiver for the Jets since he's been there. Not great, but solid. And that's always a good thing to have. It's always good to have a solid receiver that you know you can count on if you need him to step up. And like I mentioned earlier, they got tons of cap space, so they can do whatever they want in free agency. Now Sam Darnold, he's also going into his second year. He's got to get better. He's got to cut down on the turnovers. Got to be more accurate. But Darnold showed some promise just like Allen did. And this is something that I think the Jets should do. Make the defense one of the best in the league again. Why did Mark Sanchez get to 2 AFC Championship games? Because the defense was one of the best in the league. Do that again, and maybe Darnold can get you back to a Super Bowl that you haven't been in over 50 years. Alright guys, that was State of the AFC East. Next up is the NFC East. See you then.